It was a bright and calm afternoon in the quiet suburban neighborhood. The sun shone softly over the neatly trimmed lawns, and birds chirped lazily as if nothing unusual would ever disturb the peace of this place. Most people were going about their routines, mowing lawns, walking dogs, or simply enjoying the warmth outside. But inside one modest house at the end of the street, a woman was sipping her tea, reading through some paperwork, completely unaware that her day was about to take a very unexpected turn. The doorbell rang suddenly, its sharp sound cutting through the serene hum of the afternoon. Surprised, she set her cup down and walked to the door. When she opened it, she found 3 men standing there, wearing uniforms that looked official at first glance. Their clothes were neat, with badges pinned on their shirts, but there was something about their presence that felt strange. They were trying too hard to look serious, and their badges glinted in a way that seemed almost fake. One of the men spoke first, his voice firm but not quite confident. "Ma'am, we need you to step outside. We are here to enforce the neighborhood rules." The woman raised an eyebrow, her instinct immediately alerting her that something wasn't right.
"Neighborhood rules?"
she repeated, her voice calm but cautious. "And who exactly are you representing? Are you with the HOA or—" The man hesitated, looking at his companions for guidance, but they didn't provide any. "We have authority to handle violations. You need to come with us now," he said, trying to sound commanding. The woman tilted her head slightly and smiled faintly, though there was a firmness in her eyes. "I see, and may I see some identification, please?" "Any official document showing your authority?" The men exchanged quick glances, a flicker of unease passing across their faces. One of them fumbled in his pocket and produced a laminated card that looked hastily made. She studied it carefully and instantly noticed that it didn't match the standard formats used by any legal or official authority. The font was off, and the seal looked printed rather than embossed. "I'm sorry," she said politely but firmly. "This does not appear to be legitimate. You cannot just show up at someone's home and demand they comply with rules using fake identification. That's illegal." Her calm confidence seemed to rattle the men. The taller one, trying to regain control, stepped a little closer and said, "Ma'am, you don't understand. We have the right to enforce certain regulations. It would be better if you came with us peacefully." She didn't move. Instead, she subtly reached into her wallet, keeping her movements smooth and measured, and pulled out her own badge. "I understand perfectly, but I need you to understand that I am the sheriff of this county. I enforce the law, not just neighborhood rules." There was a brief moment of silence. The men's expressions changed from confidence to shock, and a flicker of panic passed over their faces. It was clear that they had not expected to face a real law enforcement officer. "I suggest you step back and explain why you are here before the situation becomes serious," she continued, her voice steady and commanding. Her eyes were calm, but they carried the weight of someone used to being in control, someone who had faced far more dangerous situations and always emerged unshaken. One of the men tried to speak, but his words stumbled over themselves. We are authorized by the HOA. We just enforcement. Rules." The woman shook her head slowly. "There is no law that allows anyone from an HOA to act as a police officer or to detain a resident. You are committing a crime by impersonating law enforcement. Now I am giving you one chance to leave my property immediately before I have to involve my deputies." At this point, a few neighbors had noticed the commotion. Some peeked through their blinds while others stepped outside to get a better view. Whispers spread quickly along the street as people tried to make sense of what they were witnessing. It wasn't every day that a situation like this unfolded in such a quiet neighborhood. The men looked around, realizing that there were witnesses. Their bravado started to crumble. The tallest man swallowed hard and muttered something incoherent, glancing nervously at the other two. The woman didn't give them a chance to recover. She kept her voice calm but sharp, making sure every word carried authority. "I am recording this encounter. I have witnesses. Any further attempt to deceive or threaten me will be met with immediate legal action. You understand the consequences of impersonating law enforcement, don't you?" By now, the tension in the air was thick. The neighbors who had stepped outside were holding their phones, some recording the scene, others ready to call for help if necessary. The fake officers could see that they were outnumbered not by force but by awareness and evidence. Their confidence had vanished. The woman continued, speaking slowly so that everyone could hear. "I suggest you leave now. Any further action on your part will be treated as an immediate threat. You have no authority here. and you are in violation of multiple laws by attempting to intimidate a resident with fake badges. Do you understand me?" One of the men finally stammered, "Yes, we'll leave." The sheriff watched them carefully, making sure they didn't try anything sudden. She maintained a calm stance, her hand resting lightly on her hip near her sidearm, not in a threatening way, but as a subtle reminder that she was fully capable of enforcing the law. As the men backed away slowly, the neighbors whispered among themselves, clearly impressed by her composure and courage. The sheriff didn't relax just yet. She continued to watch them until they left the property entirely, keeping her phone recording until the coast was clear. Once the imposters were gone, she walked back inside, closed the door, and took a deep breath. Even in her own home, she knew it was important to document everything. She reviewed the video she had recorded, noting every detail, the men's badges, their words, their gestures. Every small piece of evidence could be crucial if they attempted anything like this again, or if legal action was necessary. After a moment, she picked up the phone to call the local police department. Not because she needed backup to handle the immediate threat, but to ensure that the incident was officially recorded and that any necessary steps were taken against the men for impersonating law enforcement. She wanted to make sure that the law was on her side and that justice would be served if needed. As she made the call, she reflected on the importance of remaining calm under pressure. She knew that in situations like these, fear could cloud judgment, but staying composed allowed her to see clearly and act decisively. Her years of experience in law enforcement had prepared her for far more dangerous encounters, and she trusted her instincts completely. By the time she hung up, the neighborhood had returned to its quiet rhythm. Children played on the sidewalks, neighbors chatted in small groups, and the afternoon sun continued to shine. Yet something had changed. The residents who had witnessed the event now saw her not just as a sheriff, but as a protector, a person who could face danger calmly and make it vanish without a single unnecessary confrontation. She sat back down with her tea, her heartbeat slowly returning to normal. The paperwork she had been reviewing earlier could wait. She allowed herself a small, satisfied smile, knowing she had handled a potentially dangerous situation with skill and authority. In the peaceful suburb, the message was clear. No matter who tried to deceive or intimidate, the law was present and justice was ready to be enforced by those truly entrusted to do so. Even as the day continued, the story of her encounter began to circulate quietly among the neighbors. People shared their experiences of the afternoon, recounting how a calm, intelligent, and powerful woman had faced down imposters without a hint of fear. It was a lesson for everyone. Courage, knowledge, and composure could turn the tide in any tense moment. And in the heart of that small, seemingly ordinary neighborhood, respect for the law and the woman who embodied it grew stronger than ever. The day was far from over, even though the immediate threat had left. Inside her home, the sheriff took a few minutes to regain her focus, sipping her now slightly cooled tea. She knew the encounter was serious, but she also knew how to manage such situations. Impersonation of law enforcement was not a minor matter. It was a crime that could put real people in danger. She needed to make sure this incident was handled correctly. She began by reviewing the recording she had made on her phone. The men had tried to appear confident, but their nervous gestures were clear on video. Their fake badges, their stammering explanations, the way they hesitated, every little detail was proof of their deception. She labeled each segment of the video carefully, noting timestamps and specific actions that could later be used by authorities. Documentation was key, not just for legal purposes, but to ensure that the truth of the incident could not be twisted or ignored. As she worked, her phone rang. It was a neighbor who had witnessed part of the confrontation. Their voice was both excited and anxious. "Did you see them?" The way they were trying to act like police. "I've never seen anything like it." She smiled, even though they couldn't see it. "Yes, I saw them. I handled it and I recorded everything. I'm going to make sure this is reported properly." The neighbor laughed nervously. "You were amazing." Everyone outside was shocked. "They didn't expect someone like you to be in the house," she chuckled softly, replying, "It's important to stay calm. That's the only way to control situations like this. I'll keep everyone safe and make sure the law is followed." After the call, she decided it was time to make another one, this time to her deputy team. She explained in detail what had happened, sharing the recording and outlining the events. The deputies listened attentively, taking notes, asking questions, and ensuring that all procedural steps would be followed. They discussed the possibility of further investigation, not just to hold the fake officers accountable but also to prevent future incidents. Meanwhile, the sheriff could feel her mind working ahead. Even though the situation seemed under control, she knew that threats like these often came in waves. She needed to remain vigilant, not just for herself but for the residents in her neighborhood. Her role as a sheriff went beyond enforcing laws in the county. It included being an example of courage, professionalism, and presence of mind. While organizing her materials, she thought back to the moment when the men first approached her. Their attempt to assert authority without real credentials was bold, but it also revealed their lack of experience and understanding of real law enforcement. Their mistake had been underestimating someone who not only knew the law, but could also enforce it calmly under pressure. The contrast was stark, their nervous energy compared to her composed confidence, and the difference had made all the difference. She decided to step outside for a moment, to see the neighborhood in its natural state. The sun was beginning to lower slightly, casting warm shades across the lawns. Neighbors were now cautiously talking about what had happened, some walking over to express their concern and appreciation. She greeted each one politely, answering questions and reassuring them that there was no ongoing danger. Her calm demeanor helped ease fears, and people started to relax, realizing that their community was still safe. One elderly neighbor approached her slowly, leaning on a cane. "I can't believe what just happened. Those men, they look so official, and yet..." The sheriff nodded gently. "Appearances can be deceiving. What matters is knowing the law and staying calm. That's how situations like this are handled safely." The neighbor smiled, feeling reassured, and walked back to his porch. Children in the distance continued to play, though now with more curiosity and attention to the adults around them. The sheriff realized how much her actions had affected everyone, showing them that courage wasn't about rushing in recklessly. It was about knowing what to do, staying calm and protecting others. Back inside, she began drafting a detailed report. Every word mattered. She described how the men had arrived, their appearance, the conversation that had taken place, and the exact actions they had taken. She included her own actions, noting how she maintained control of the situation, recorded evidence, and ensured safety. She wrote clearly and concisely, knowing that this report could serve as a legal document if the situation escalated further. As she worked, she thought about what could have happened if she hadn't been home or hadn't been aware of the situation. It was a chilling thought, but it also reinforced the importance of vigilance and preparation. She made a note to conduct a neighborhood awareness session, teaching residents how to recognize potential fraud or impersonation situations. Education and preparedness were just as crucial as enforcement. Hours passed and the day moved toward evening. She made calls to other law enforcement contacts, ensuring that any information about the fake officers was distributed to neighboring departments. This would help prevent the men from attempting similar acts elsewhere. Communication, she knew, was a critical part of maintaining safety in the larger community. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from a reporter who had caught wind of the incident. The sheriff was careful in her reply, acknowledging the event without sharing sensitive details that could compromise ongoing investigations. She emphasized professionalism and the importance of lawful action, setting the tone for how the story would be told to the public. She leaned back in her chair, reflecting on how quickly ordinary days could turn extraordinary. One moment she was enjoying tea and paperwork. The next, she was facing individuals pretending to have authority over her. Yet the experience reinforced her commitment to justice, her understanding of law, and her ability to act decisively when required. As night approached, she finally took a moment to relax. She walked through her home, checking doors and windows, not out of fear but as a routine practice. The evening was calm, but she remained alert, knowing that vigilance was part of her role. She paused at her front window, looking out at the street. The neighborhood lights flickered softly, and she felt a sense of quiet accomplishment. She had handled a difficult and potentially dangerous situation with skill, professionalism, and calm authority. Before going to bed, she reviewed the video one last time, making final notes and backing up the files. Every piece of evidence was secure, and she had ensured that her report was thorough and ready for submission. She reflected on the importance of being prepared, of staying calm under pressure, and of understanding both the law and human behavior. That night, as the house settled into quiet, the sheriff felt a sense of peace. She had faced a challenge, managed it successfully, and protected her community. She knew the day would be talked about, but she also knew that the most important outcome was the safety of those around her. The incident was a reminder of the unpredictable nature of life and the need for readiness, courage, and composure in every situation. The story of her confrontation with the fake officers was far from over. There would be investigations, interviews, and perhaps legal action against those who tried to deceive and intimidate. But for now, she could rest knowing that she had acted correctly, safeguarded her home, and set an example for her community. The residents could sleep a little easier, confident that their sheriff was not only capable but also vigilant, calm, and ever ready to face challenges with intelligence and courage. The next morning would bring more calls, more planning, and perhaps more surprises, but she was prepared. Every step she had taken had been thoughtful and deliberate, proving that knowledge, composure, and courage could turn any situation in one's favor. And with that, she allowed herself to relax for the first time since the imposters had appeared, knowing that she had handled the situation with the professionalism and calm that defined her career and her character. The following morning, the sheriff woke up early with a sense of purpose. Although the immediate threat from the fake officers had passed, she knew her responsibilities had only just begun. There was more to do to make sure that the men who had attempted to intimidate her were held accountable, and to prevent similar incidents from happening to anyone else in her neighborhood. She started her day by reviewing the footage she had recorded, watching each moment carefully. The men's attempts at authority, their nervous gestures, and the shaky excuses they gave were all clear in the video. She paused at several frames, noting their expressions, their mannerisms, and even the words that they had stumbled over. This evidence would be critical if law enforcement or legal authorities were to pursue charges for impersonation. Every detail mattered. Her phone rang again. This time it was a neighbor who had seen the men retreat down the street. "Good morning, ma'am," the voice said with a mix of concern and admiration. "I just wanted to check in. Are you okay? And do you need anything?" The sheriff smiled faintly, appreciating the concern. "I'm fine, thank you. I'm making sure everything is documented and reported. I want to ensure that these men can't do this to anyone else." The neighbor hesitated, then asked, "Do you think they'll come back?" She replied calmly, "They might, but they'll think twice now. The law is clear, and I have documented everything. Anyone attempting this again will face serious consequences." After the call, she turned her attention to drafting a formal complaint for the local police department. She wrote everything in clear, simple language, detailing how the men arrived, what they said, and their attempts to assert authority using fake credentials. She included her own credentials as the sheriff and emphasized the legal risks associated with impersonating law enforcement. Her report was thorough, factual, and unemotional, focusing entirely on accuracy and clarity. Once the report was complete, she called her deputies to brief them on the plan moving forward. They discussed possible actions, including contacting the HOA to investigate whether anyone in the neighborhood had connections to the men, checking for prior incidents, and preparing for any follow-up. Every step was carefully considered, ensuring that the response was professional and measured. As she worked, she reflected on the previous day's confrontation. She remembered how the men had approached her with confidence only to falter. Once she revealed her identity, she realized that their biggest mistake had been underestimating her. Many people she knew allowed fear to control their reactions, but she had trained herself to remain calm and composed no matter the circumstances. That composure had been the difference between a potentially dangerous situation and one that was resolved without harm. Later that morning, she stepped outside to walk around the neighborhood. She greeted neighbors, answered questions, and reassured them that the community was safe. Children played on the sidewalks and parents watched closely, some still a little wary after witnessing the strange events the day before. The sheriff's presence reassured them. They could see firsthand that their safety was a priority, and that authority, when exercised correctly, could bring calm and order. While walking, she noticed the fake officers' actions had left a lingering unease among some residents. People were cautious about opening doors or speaking to anyone claiming authority without verification. The sheriff smiled, understanding that this caution was healthy. She spoke briefly with a few residents about recognizing real law enforcement versus imposters, giving practical tips on what to look for, including proper badges, official identification numbers, and communication protocols. She emphasized that anyone unsure should always call the local police department to verify credentials before complying with requests from individuals claiming authority. Returning home, she sat down to organize her notes and evidence. She categorized every piece of information, labeling video clips, timestamps, and written statements. The process was meticulous but necessary. Proper documentation could make the difference in holding the imposters accountable and ensuring justice was served. She also took a moment to consider the psychological aspect of the encounter. These men had tried to use intimidation to manipulate her into compliance, but she knew that fear was a tool that could be controlled and that staying calm and confident could turn the tables on those trying to exploit others. Her calm demeanor had not only protected herself, but also prevented a potentially dangerous escalation that could have harmed the neighborhood. Around midday, the sheriff contacted the police department to provide an update. She spoke with the officer in charge, explaining that she had filed a detailed report and gathered evidence. The officer expressed appreciation for her thoroughness and assured her that the case would be pursued. They discussed the possibility of tracking down the men to determine if they had attempted similar actions elsewhere. The sheriff felt satisfied knowing that her documentation and quick thinking would aid the investigation. While handling the case, she remembered to maintain her normal routines. She cooked a simple lunch and checked on the elderly neighbor who had shown concern. She walked through her home, checking locks and security systems not out of fear but as part of her careful habits. Every step she took reinforced the message that safety was not just about reacting to threats, but about preparation and vigilance. By mid-afternoon, news of the incident had spread quietly through the neighborhood. People were talking about how a real sheriff had faced down imposters without hesitation. Some residents shared their appreciation, while others expressed relief that someone with experience and authority was nearby. The sheriff appreciated the support but reminded them that the most important thing was staying alert and following proper procedures in any suspicious encounter. She spent the rest of the afternoon reaching out to other community leaders and neighborhood associations. She offered guidance on handling potential fraud or impersonation situations and shared strategies to educate residents without causing unnecessary fear. She emphasized awareness, preparedness, and calm decision-making, ensuring that the lessons from the encounter could benefit everyone. As evening approached, she reviewed her notes one more time, checking for any gaps in the evidence. She ensured that all video files were backed up, reports were clearly written, and any witness statements were recorded accurately. She wanted to make sure that if the case went to court, everything would be ready, leaving no room for doubt. When the sun began to set, the sheriff took a moment to sit on her porch, reflecting on the events of the past 2 days. The neighborhood had returned to its quiet routine, but the memory of the confrontation lingered in the air. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction knowing she had handled the situation correctly, protecting her home, her community, and the integrity of her position as a law enforcement officer. She thought about the broader implications of the event. The incident was more than just a strange encounter. It highlighted the need for vigilance, knowledge, and courage in everyday life. People needed to understand that authority came with responsibility, and that attempting to exploit others through deception could never succeed against someone prepared and informed. Finally, she prepared for the night, checking that everything in her home was secure. She reflected on her actions and the lessons learned. Courage, she knew, was not just about bold moves, but about staying calm, thinking clearly, and making decisions that protected others. She had demonstrated this, and the neighborhood now knew it. As darkness settled over the quiet streets, the sheriff felt a renewed sense of commitment. The fake officer's attempts to intimidate her had failed, but the experience had reinforced her dedication to her role and her community. She knew there would be more challenges in the future, but she was ready. With knowledge, composure, and the law on her side, she could face any situation with confidence and protect those who relied on her. The night was calm, the neighborhood peaceful, and the sheriff satisfied that her actions had set an example of professionalism, courage, and vigilance. Tomorrow would bring more work, but for now she allowed herself a moment of quiet pride, knowing she had turned a potentially dangerous encounter into a story of strength, intelligence, and authority. The next morning, the sheriff awoke with a sense of determination. The events of the past few days had reinforced the importance of vigilance, preparation, and calm action. She knew that while the immediate threat from the fake officers had passed, the situation required further attention. Ensuring accountability and maintaining the safety of her neighborhood were now her primary concerns. She began the day by reviewing her notes and the video recordings of the encounter. Every detail mattered, from the way the men had approached to the stammering explanations they gave when confronted. She carefully labeled each segment of the footage, noting timestamps and specific actions that could be used as evidence. The goal was to create a clear, factual record that left no room for doubt. Documentation was crucial, not just for legal purposes, but to ensure that the truth of the incident would be recognized. Her phone rang shortly after she began her review. It was one of her deputies calling to provide updates on the investigation. They had been able to trace the men's identities partially, confirming that they had no official connection to any law enforcement agency. The sheriff listened carefully, asking questions and making mental notes about next steps. She understood that a methodical approach was necessary. Rash decisions could create complications, while careful, evidence-based action could bring the perpetrators to justice. After the call, she decided to step outside and walk through the neighborhood. She wanted to connect with residents, answer questions, and provide reassurance. As she strolled down the quiet streets, she saw neighbors who had been watching the previous encounter from their windows. Some were tending gardens, others walking pets, and a few were standing on their porches, curious and slightly anxious. The sheriff greeted each person warmly. She explained calmly what had happened and reassured them that the neighborhood was safe. She emphasized the importance of vigilance and awareness without causing unnecessary fear. Children played nearby and parents watched closely, grateful for her presence. Her composed demeanor helped ease concerns and people began to relax, feeling reassured that their community was protected by someone capable and experienced. One neighbor approached her cautiously, a mix of curiosity and worry on their face. "I can't believe those men came here pretending to be police. What would have happened if you weren't home?" The sheriff smiled gently. "That's why preparation and awareness are so important. Always check credentials and never allow yourself to be intimidated by someone claiming authority without proof. If I hadn't been here, or if I hadn't recognized the signs, the situation could have been more dangerous. But knowledge and calm action make all the difference." After speaking with the neighbors, she returned home and began drafting a detailed statement for the police department. She included a timeline of events, descriptions of the men, and all actions taken during the encounter. She made sure to keep her writing clear, factual, and concise. The report would serve as a crucial document for legal proceedings and ensure that the imposters could be held accountable. While writing, she reflected on the psychological aspect of the situation. The men had tried to use intimidation to assert control, relying on fear to manipulate her. But she knew that fear could be managed. Staying calm, thinking clearly, and acting with confidence were essential in any tense situation. Her training and experience allowed her to see through their bluff and maintain authority without escalating the conflict. By midday, she had organized her evidence and reports, backing up all files securely. She contacted the local police department to provide an update, ensuring that her documentation would aid in any legal proceedings. The officer on the other end expressed appreciation for her thoroughness and assured her that the case would be pursued diligently. The sheriff felt a sense of satisfaction knowing that the law would be enforced and that the imposters could not escape accountability. Later, she conducted a brief meeting with her deputies discussing possible next steps. They talked about contacting the HOA to investigate whether any internal connections had enabled the men, checking for prior incidents, and preparing for any follow-up actions. Every step was carefully planned to ensure professionalism, thoroughness, and safety. The sheriff emphasized that the key was methodical action, not impulsive reactions. After the meeting, she took a moment to reflect on the encounter. She remembered the way the men had approached with false confidence, only to falter when confronted with the truth. Their biggest mistake had been underestimating her. Many people allow fear to control their reactions, but she had remained calm and decisive, turning a potentially dangerous situation into a controlled resolution. Her composure had not only protected herself, but also prevented harm to her neighbors and maintained the integrity of her role. In the afternoon, she walked around the neighborhood again, checking in with residents. She provided guidance on how to recognize imposters, emphasizing the importance of verification and caution. She explained practical steps, such as checking badges, verifying identification numbers, and contacting local law enforcement if unsure. Her advice was simple but powerful, empowering residents to protect themselves without causing panic. Back at home, she reviewed the legal aspects of the situation. She researched laws regarding impersonation of law enforcement and the potential penalties the men could face. Understanding the legal framework helped her anticipate the next steps and ensure that any actions taken were fully supported by the law. She also prepared additional documentation to provide to prosecutors if the case moved forward. As evening approached, the sheriff took a break to relax briefly, walking through her home and checking security measures. She wasn't worried, but she valued preparedness. Every lock, camera, and safety measure reinforced her sense of security and ensured that she was ready for any future incidents. Later, she reflected on the broader impact of the events. The incident was more than a confrontation. It was a lesson in vigilance, courage, and professionalism. The neighbors had witnessed her actions and learned that authority, when exercised correctly, brings reassurance and safety. Her composure had turned fear into understanding and empowered the community. Before nightfall, she completed her final notes, ensuring that all evidence was properly labeled, backed up, and organized. Her reports were clear, factual, and comprehensive, leaving no room for misunderstanding. She knew that meticulous preparation would be critical if the case went to court or if further actions were required. As darkness settled over the neighborhood, the sheriff sat on her porch, taking a moment to reflect. The streets were quiet and the homes were peaceful. She felt a sense of accomplishment and calm. She had turned a threatening situation into an example of professionalism and courage. Her actions had not only protected herself but also her community, demonstrating that knowledge, preparation, and composure are essential in maintaining safety. The sheriff knew that tomorrow would bring new responsibilities, calls, and perhaps unexpected challenges, but she was ready. She had faced imposters, protected her neighborhood, and set an example of courage and professionalism. With knowledge, calm, and vigilance, she was prepared to handle anything that came her way. That night, she reflected on the lessons learned. Courage is not just about bold actions. It is about calm, clear thinking, and deliberate decisions. Knowledge and preparation allow one to act effectively, even under pressure, and community is strengthened when leaders act with integrity and protect those who rely on them. The sheriff felt a quiet pride, knowing that she had fulfilled her duty and set a standard for her community to follow. The following day, the sheriff felt a renewed sense of responsibility. The events of the previous days had reinforced the importance of being alert, prepared, and calm in the face of unexpected challenges. She knew that while the immediate threat from the fake officers had been neutralized, her work was far from over. Ensuring accountability, spreading awareness, and maintaining the safety of her community remained her top priorities. She began the morning by reviewing all documentation once more. Every piece of evidence, the video recordings, the notes, the witness statements, was carefully organized and labeled. She double-checked timestamps and descriptions, making sure everything was clear and thorough. Precision was crucial. The more complete the record, the stronger the case against the imposters would be, and the clearer the message would be that such behavior could not go unchecked. After reviewing the files, she reached out to the local police department to provide an update. The officers she spoke with expressed appreciation for her careful documentation and assured her that an investigation was underway. They confirmed that the men had no lawful authority to act as police officers and that their actions were considered criminal. The sheriff felt satisfied knowing that justice was being pursued and that her preparation would aid the authorities in holding the perpetrators accountable. She decided to spend part of the morning walking through her neighborhood again. Even though the immediate danger had passed, connecting with residents and reassuring them was important. As she strolled through the streets, she noticed neighbors tending to their gardens, walking their pets, or simply enjoying the sunshine. The sheriff greeted everyone she passed, explaining briefly what had occurred and emphasizing the importance of awareness and caution. Her calm presence reassured them and they began to relax, realizing that their community was safe under her watchful eye. A group of neighbors gathered near the corner of the street, curious about the events that had unfolded. The sheriff approached them and answered questions patiently. She explained how to recognize imposters, including verifying badges, checking identification numbers, and contacting law enforcement when in doubt. She stressed that staying calm, collecting evidence, and reporting suspicious behavior were the best ways to protect oneself. Her advice was simple, practical, and empowering, giving residents confidence and knowledge. Later, she returned home to continue her preparations. She drafted a detailed legal report summarizing every aspect of the encounter. She described how the men had approached, what they said, their fake credentials, and the steps she had taken to manage the situation. She included her own actions, emphasizing how she maintained control, collected evidence, and ensured the safety of herself and her neighbors. Her report was clear, precise, and factual, leaving no room for misinterpretation. While working, she reflected on the psychological dynamics of the encounter. The men had tried to use fear as a tool, attempting to intimidate her into compliance. But she had remained calm, observing their behavior and responding logically. Her composure had not only protected her but had also prevented the situation from escalating, keeping the neighborhood safe. She realized that courage was not about confrontation alone. It was about maintaining control, thinking clearly, and taking the right steps under pressure. By midday, she had completed her report and ensured that all evidence was backed up securely. She contacted her deputies to brief them on the next steps. They discussed possible follow-up actions, including monitoring for any repeat attempts, coordinating with local authorities, and preparing for legal proceedings. Every step was carefully considered, with the goal of ensuring accountability while maintaining safety and professionalism. In the afternoon, she organized a small community meeting, inviting neighbors to learn about the incident and discuss safety measures. Residents attended, some still curious, others concerned. The sheriff spoke clearly and calmly, explaining the events, sharing lessons, and providing practical advice. She demonstrated how to recognize suspicious behavior, emphasized the importance of documentation, and outlined steps to report incidents safely. Her approach was educational rather than fear-inducing, empowering people to take action without panic. After the meeting, several neighbors approached her privately to express gratitude. They were impressed by her calm demeanor, thorough preparation, and ability to manage a potentially dangerous situation. She listened carefully to their concerns and reassured them that the neighborhood remained safe. Her presence and guidance had made a lasting impact, instilling confidence and awareness among the residents. Later, the sheriff reviewed legal materials related to impersonation of law enforcement. She examined potential penalties, previous cases, and investigative procedures. Her goal was to be fully prepared for any legal actions that might follow, and to ensure that the imposters faced appropriate consequences. Knowledge and preparation, she knew, were essential in achieving justice. As evening approached, she took a quiet moment on her porch, reflecting on the events. The neighborhood was calm, the streets emptying as families settled in for the night. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment, knowing she had turned a threatening situation into an example of professionalism, courage, and composure. Her actions had protected her home, her neighbors, and the integrity of her office. She also thought about the broader lessons of the incident. Courage was not merely about confronting danger, it was about being prepared, staying calm, and making decisions that protected oneself and others. Awareness and knowledge were powerful tools, allowing individuals to respond effectively to unexpected challenges. The sheriff realized that her actions had not only safeguarded her community, but had also provided a model for how to handle situations with poise and intelligence. Before nightfall, she completed her final notes, ensuring that every piece of evidence was properly labeled, backed up, and organized. Her reports were comprehensive, factual, and clear. She had documented the encounter thoroughly, prepared her community, and coordinated with law enforcement to pursue accountability. As the stars appeared in the night sky, she reflected on the events and their impact. The fake officer's attempt to intimidate her had failed, and the neighborhood had witnessed the power of calm, professional action. Residents now had knowledge, confidence, and reassurance, and the imposters faced the consequences of their actions. The sheriff felt a quiet pride, knowing that she had upheld the law, protected her community, and demonstrated the importance of vigilance and composure. The next morning would bring new responsibilities, but she was ready. She had handled the incident with intelligence, professionalism, and courage. Her neighborhood was safer because of her actions, and the imposters had been exposed. With knowledge, preparedness, and determination, she could face any challenge that came her way. The incident had become a story of resilience, strength, and the importance of standing firm in the face of deception. As she prepared for bed, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She had faced a rare and potentially dangerous challenge, managed it flawlessly, and ensured that her community was safe. The sheriff knew that her actions had set a standard for others to follow. Courage, calmness, and knowledge had prevailed, and the neighborhood had been reminded of the value of preparedness, vigilance, and professional integrity.